Chosen ones, God said, take this seriously. Urgent alert for tomorrow. Elias woke before sunrise, his chest heavy with an unease he couldn't explain. The stillness of his bedroom pressed down on him, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on his nightstand. He tried to steady his breathing, but then it came, clearer than any dream, sharper than any memory. A whisper brushed against his ear, soft, yet undeniable. Chosen one, tomorrow will test the earth. Take this seriously. The words did not echo in the room. They echoed inside him, vibrating through bone and marrow. Elias sat up, heart pounding, his palms damp with sweat. He wasn't religious, hadn't been for years. Faith, to him, was a relic, something buried with his childhood prayers. Yet this voice, it wasn't imagined. It carried a weight, an authority, as though the air itself bowed to it. He stumbled to the window, fumbling with the curtains. The horizon glowed faintly red, though the sun had not yet risen. It wasn't dawn, it was something else, something unnatural. A warning painted across the sky. Elias pressed his hand to the glass, his breath fogging against it. He wanted to dismiss it as a nightmare, but the dread in his chest told him otherwise. The whisper had not asked. It had commanded. For the first time in years, his legs gave out, and he found himself on his knees, an instinct long forgotten returning unbidden. His lips trembled with a prayer he thought he'd never speak again. Tomorrow would come, and with it, something that would test not just him, but the earth itself. By noon, Elias was no longer alone. The voice that had pierced his sleep had not singled him out. It had reached others, scattering seeds of fear and conviction into hearts that should never have crossed paths. They came one by one, each compelled by a force they could not name, drawn to the same forgotten place, an abandoned church. At the edge of the city, its steeple leaned as though tired of holding on, and the wooden doors groaned when pushed open. Dust floated in the shafts of muted light, and yet, despite the ruin, the stained glass above the altar burned with an unnatural brilliance, colors too alive for neglect and decay. The first to arrive after Elias was a woman with scarred hands. She lingered at the doorway, her gaze flickering nervously, as though every step closer cost her something. Her palms bore marks of fire or blade, stories etched in a skin that would not heal. She spoke little, but when Elias met her eyes, he recognized the same heaviness that had pressed against his chest that morning. Then came the soldier. His uniform was gone, but the rigid posture and haunted stare remained. Discharged, Elias would later learn, not for weakness but for defiance. His boots echoed across the hollow floor as he entered, a man used to orders but now led by something far greater. A grieving mother followed, her hair unkempt, her eyes hollow from nights without sleep. She carried no child, only the weight of absence. Elias felt her sorrow like a tide washing into the church, silent yet suffocating. And last, the child, barely 10 years old. His voice rang with truths too ancient for his small body. When he spoke, it wasn't his tone that silenced them, but the weight of his words, words that felt older than the building they stood in. He walked calmly to the center, as if he had been here before, as if he had always known this place. They gathered in a loose circle beneath the stained glass. None had been invited, yet none could deny why they were there. The air pulsed with something unseen, pressing down on them like the moment before a storm. Each one carried a different fear, a different wound. Yet when they finally spoke, their voices carried the same haunting echo. We were chosen. The urgency of tomorrow hung between them, thick and undeniable. Something vast, something beyond comprehension, waited just beyond the horizon, and whether they were ready or not, it had called their names. Night came heavy and restless, draping the ruined church in shadows that seemed to breathe. The chosen ones lingered inside, speaking little, for the air itself felt charged with a dread they could not name. Then it began. Thunder rolled across the heavens, but there was no lightning to split the sky. The sound was not sharp, it was deep, rumbling, endless, as though the earth itself groaned in protest. Windows rattled in their frames, Dust fell from the rafters, and yet not a single flash of light followed the sound. Outside, birds tumbled from the air, their wings stiff, their cries swallowed before they hit the ground. Dogs in the surrounding streets whined and hid, refusing to bark, their instincts sharper than human reason. Even insects had gone silent, leaving the night eerily hollow. But it was the mirrors that broke them. Every time one of the chosen passed a reflective surface, a shard of glass, a cracked bathroom mirror, even the gleam of polished wood, their own faces faltered. For the briefest second, they did not see themselves, but pale, spectral versions of who they were. Their skin looked ashen, their mouths set in grim silence, and their eyes blazed with fire. Not warmth, not life, burning, consuming light. The first scream came from the grieving mother when she glimpsed her reflection in a broken shard of stained glass near the altar. The others rushed to see, but each one beheld the same truth. They were marked, and the mark was not hidden anymore. Silence pressed on them, suffocating, until the child finally spoke. His voice did not tremble, though his words carved fear into the others' bones. God said, "This is urgent. Tomorrow, the world will tremble." At that exact moment, the church bell tolled. One deep, shuddering clang rolled through the air, though no hand had touched the rope, no wind had swayed the tower. The sound echoed too long, as if the bell was ringing across more than just the city, as if the heavens themselves had heard. The chosen froze where they stood, every heart beating in rhythm with that unnatural toll. The warning was no longer whispered. It had been declared. Tomorrow was coming, and with it, the trembling of the earth. On the eve of the coming storm, the church was silent, yet it throbbed with a strange energy, as if the very walls were holding their breath. The chosen ones stood scattered, unease twisting in their stomachs, until it began, soft at first, a warmth spreading beneath their skin. Symbols appeared. They were etched into their bodies as though by fire itself, glowing faintly at first, then brighter, humming with a life that defied reason. Lines of golden heat traced along arms, across shoulders, even the hollow planes of their faces. Elias stared at his own mark, a jagged, intricate symbol that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Every thrum felt alive, a warning, a call, a tether to something vast and unimaginable. The others gasped, touching their marks with trembling fingers. The woman with scarred hands traced hers over the knuckles where fire seemed to have kissed her skin. The soldier's mark burned along his forearm like molten metal, even as he clenched his fists in disbelief. The mother's mark flickered like embers in a dying hearth, and the child's burned bright like the sun refusing to set. No words could capture what they felt. It was not pain, nor pleasure, nor fear alone. It was certainty. They finally understood. This was no test of faith, no trial of ritual. It was a command, etched into flesh, as if the world itself had chosen the carriers of its last hope. They weren't chosen for comfort. They weren't chosen for explanation. They were chosen to stand when tomorrow came and broke everything. And tomorrow was only hours away. The shadows around them seemed to shiver, stretching unnaturally as the golden light of the marks bathed the ruined church. Dust rose from the floor without wind, twirling in slow, deliberate spirals. The air felt electric, as if the building itself was alive and aware that the earth's final hours were imminent. Elias clenched his jaw. The weight of what was coming pressed against him like a physical force. He looked at the others, their eyes wide, their fear mirrored in his own. And for the first time, they were united by something beyond words. They were no longer 5 strangers. They were 5 guardians, chosen for a task that would begin with the breaking of dawn. Midnight struck like a hammer against the city's quiet bones. The air turned sharp and raw, each breath scorching as if it carried embers from a fire no one could see. Fog rolled along the streets, thickening into a haze that blurred the edges of reality. Lamps flickered one by one, their pale yellow light trembling and dying like weak hearts. The city itself groaned, a low, resonant rumble that rolled beneath their feet and traveled through walls, shaking loose dust and fear alike. The chosen ones stood together in the middle of an empty street. Their marks glowed brighter now, golden flames licking along skin and bone, casting long, quivering shadows that danced over the cracked pavement. Elias could feel the heat radiating not just from their marks, but from the very ground beneath them, as though the planet had caught fire and whispered directly into their souls. Then it came, the voice. No longer a whisper that brushed the ear, no longer a subtle warning. It roared, a thunderous command that rolled across rooftops, rattled glass, and set the air vibrating inside their chests. Chosen ones, take this seriously. This is the hour you were called for. The words were more than sound. They were pressure, weight, a force that seemed to twist reality itself. And then the ground betrayed them. It cracked, not with a simple fracture, but with the slow, inevitable fury of the world splitting in two. Asphalt heaved upward, concrete shattered into jagged teeth, and a deep, hungry chasm yawned before them. Dust and debris shot into the sky like sparks from a forge. Elias felt the tremor under his feet, the vibration crawling up his legs, searing his nerves with terror and awe. The others froze, some screaming, some silent in disbelief, but the marks on their skin flared even brighter, connecting them with a golden thread only they could see. The fire of the symbols seemed to pulse in response to the Earth's raw energy, as if the planet itself acknowledged them as guardians. Above, the sky roared with divine fury, clouds twisting in impossible shapes, wind spiraling like fingers across the horizon, and flashes of unseen lightning that illuminated the world in ghostly white bursts. The hour had arrived. The first hour of tomorrow was not coming. It had already begun. From the gaping wound in the earth, there came no fire, no molten glow, but something far more terrifying, shadows. They rose like smoke, twisting into forms that should not have had substance, yet moved with intent. Human-shaped, but faceless, their hollow eyes glowed faintly as they whispered in voices thin as wind cutting through broken glass. Names. They whisper names. The names of people long gone, of mistakes buried, of sins thought forgotten. The sound wasn't loud, yet it tore through the chosen like blades. Elias staggered back as he heard his own name curl from a shadow's mouth, followed by the voice of someone he had failed years ago. His chest tightened, the mark on his arm blazing hotter, as if reacting to the confrontation. The grieving mother dropped to her knees, clutching her ears, rocking as if she could block the sound from reaching her. Tears streaked down her face, for the shadows spoke the name of her lost child, over and over, until the syllables themselves became a wound. The soldier drew a blade from his belt, though his hand trembled. His breath came in short bursts as one of the figures stepped closer, mirroring his every movement. When its whisper reached him, he froze. "Coward," it said in the voice of his fallen comrade, the man he had failed to save. His blade quivered, and for the first time, the hardened soldier looked like a frightened child. Elias felt his throat tighten as he realized the truth. These weren't strangers, weren't demons wearing human skin. No, these were their own shadows, fragments of guilt, regret, and fear called into life by whatever force had split the earth open. Each one carried the weight of a truth they had tried to bury. The child stood at the center, watching them without fear. His eyes reflected the golden fire of his mark, and when he spoke, his voice cut clean through the whispers. It was steady, unnaturally so, like something far older speaking through him. If you don't face them tonight, tomorrow ends for everyone. The shadows writhed, their hollow mouths stretching wider, their whispers rising into a dreadful chorus. The street trembled beneath them, the chasm still yawning wider. The chosen had no choice. Tomorrow depended on what they did in this moment, whether they could fight their shadows or be consumed by them. The night became a crucible. One by one, the chosen stepped into the circle of shadows, their marks blazing brighter as though summoned by the test itself. The air grew suffocating, thick with smoke and memory, every whisper from the hollow-eyed figures striking at their wounds like poisoned blades. The woman with scarred hands was the first to move. Her body trembled, but she lifted her palms, scar tissue against the shade that had taken the form of her abuser. Its voice coiled around her, mocking, cruel, the same words that had once crushed her spirit. For a heartbeat she faltered, but then her scars burned with light, and she pressed her hands against the phantom's chest. The shadow shrieked, writhing as fire licked across its form, until it dissolved into ash and silence. She gasped, her hands glowing with victory, her body lighter as if chains had fallen away. The soldier's turn came next. He gripped his blade tightly, sweat dripping down his face, as the figures of the men he had lost stepped forward, their eyes hollow, their whispers accusing. "You left us." The steel shook in his hand. He could not fight them with violence. With a broken cry, he dropped his weapon, falling to his knees. "I didn't forget you," he whispered, his chest heaving. "I carry you with me." His mark flared, spreading light across his arms like molten gold. The shadows of his comrades stilled, then dissolved into the air like smoke freed from a fire. Then it was Elias. The earth seemed to quiet as his shadow took form. Not a stranger, not a monster, but himself. His reflection stepped from the dark, pale, with hollow eyes like an empty mirror. Its mouth curled as it whispered words that pierced deeper than any blade. "You wasted your calling. You turned your back. You are too late." Elias staggered, his chest tightening as memories surged. Years of walking away, years of doubt, of ignoring whispers that had once been faint but familiar. The guilt rose like a tide, threatening to drown him. His fist shook. His knees wanted to buckle, but then his mark ignited. It flared like wildfire across his arm, burning so brightly the shadows recoiled from its light. He clenched, his fists planting his feet into the cracked earth, and met his reflection's hollow gaze with unyielding resolve. "No more running," Elias whispered. The golden fire consumed the shadow, tearing it apart strand by strand, until it was nothing but smoke carried into the night. Elias's chest heaved, sweat rolling down his brow, but the weight was gone. He was still trembling, but he was still standing. Around them, the storm faltered. Each victory weakened its fury. The clouds, though still dark, no longer rolled with the same violence. The ground's trembling slowed, as if the earth itself acknowledged their triumphs. And yet, even as silence reclaimed the night for a fleeting moment, the air held no peace. For the chosen knew, the trial had not ended. This was only preparation. Tomorrow's hour was crawling ever closer, and the true storm had yet to arrive. The night was heavy, a silence stretched too thin, until the sky itself tore apart. It didn't split with light, as dawn would, but with sound. A sound so vast, so crushing, it rattled bones and shook the marrow inside them. The heavens roared, not like thunder, but like the collapse of mountains, like the first sound of creation tearing itself open again. The chosen ones clutched their ears, but the voice pierced through flesh and bone, vibrating straight into their souls. It was the voice, the same presence that had whispered before dawn, that had thundered at midnight, now unveiled, unrestrained. "You were not chosen to hide. You were chosen to warn. Tomorrow, the seal breaks." The words were not a message. They were a command written into existence itself. The very air bent under their weight, the ground humming with the aftershock of divine speech. The church groaned as if alive, its wooden beams creaking, its old stones trembling. Then, with a sound like glass weeping, the stained windows shattered. But instead of falling, the fragments hung suspended in the air, each shard catching the faint glow of the chosen's marks, reflecting them back in 1,000 fractured lights. It was as though the night sky had bled into the church, stars dangling in midair, caught between heaven and earth. And then they saw it, through the broken roof and beyond the fractured heavens, an image unfurled, vast, merciless, undeniable, an oncoming tide of black fire. It crawled across the horizon like a living wave, devouring all in its path. Trees, rivers, mountains. It consumed everything, leaving only ash and silence. No light could pierce it. No hope could stand in it. It was not just fire. It was erasure, an undoing of existence itself. The chosen ones fell into stunned silence, their glowing marks flickering as though even they quailed before the vision. The grieving mother clutched her chest, whispering prayers through sobs. The soldier gritted his teeth, his fists trembling at the sight of a war no blade could fight. Elias could only stare, his mind reeling at the enormity of what loomed ahead. The child, however, simply whispered, "Less than a day," and the words hung in the air, sharper than any scream. They had less than 24 hours. Word spread without phones, without messages. People simply knew. By morning, hundreds gathered around the chosen, desperate, fearful. The chosen didn't feel like leaders, yet the marks on their skin burned brighter in front of the crowd. Elias raised his hand, his voice steady for the first time.